the operations director and co-owner of M&E Global Logistics, who is going to talk about the ABC of international logistics between Mexico and Canada. Hi, Emilio, I can see you now. I am going to introduce yourself. Emilio is in charge of logistics, distribution, compliance, and coordination of customs processes. He has more than 15 years of experience in logistics and foreign trade, working for Canadian, Brazilian, and American transnational companies to start operations and development in Mexico. In his professional career, he has also worked in companies in the steel sector in Mexico, which gives him experience in import and export processes for steel, aluminum, and their derivatives for the automotive, industrial, and electrical appliances sector. He's an industrial engineer with a Master's of Science in Quality and Productivity from ITESM Campus, Monterrey. Please welcome Emilio. Thank you so much for being here. Now the audience is yours. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. Did I hear you? Did I hear well? Is everything okay with the sound?
Yes, I can hear you and see you well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's start. You help me with change the next slide, please.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, it is an honor to be here, to be sharing some basic points of international logistics, focus on Mexico and Canada relationship and trade agreements. So the next slide, please. Okay, what we're going to review today, we're going to talk about a little bit of the importance of the Incoterms. We are going to discuss a little bit about the documents needed for the international logistics. And finally, we will talk about the logistics, the specific logistics between Mexico and Canada. So if you help me with the next slide, we will start with the Incoterms. Well, the Incoterms were created by the International Chamber of Commerce back in 1936. There is a language for international sales and transactions. Today we are in the ninth version. It's the Incoterms 2020. It's a trademark. What are the Incoterms? Where there are rules that are worldwide known and provides clarity and predictability to the business. There are specific guidance to everyone that participates in the import and export of global trade. So in general speaking, we can say that it is a common language between countries to make a sell or a buy in the foreign trade environment. So no matter if you are Canadian or Mexican or Brazilian or from Russia or from India or from China, I mean, these Incoterms give us a common language because we know the language has very meanings and very different interpretations. So to clarify this, that's why the Incoterms were created back in 1936. So the Incoterms define the responsibilities and the obligations on costs, risks to seller and buyers, and specifies who is responsible of paying and managing the shipments, insurance, documentation, custom clearance, etc. So we are going to review a little bit of that. And the next slide. Could you help me with the next? Okay, there is the Incoterms, as I said, define the responsibility and the risk. There are 11. There are the Incoterms that are for any mean of transportation. That means sea, air or land, which is Ex Works, is free carrier, is carriage paid to, is carriage and insurance paid to, delivered at place unloaded, and delivered duty paid. That's for any mean of transportation. And the Incoterms that are only for sea transportation are free along ship site, free on board, cost and freight, and cost, insurance, and freight. So as you can see, we short that name in 3 letters. It's how you put it in the physical documents that you need to make an import and an export. So there are different, as I said, you can use the Incoterms that is fit for you and that is agreed with you between buyer and seller. And let's review a little bit some examples to clarify or to illustrate the difference between risk, costs, and insurance on that. So will you help me with the next slide? For example, this Incoterm Ex Works, it is, you can see the blue color is the seller. It's represented by the seller. The buyer is represented by the orange color. So if you see in the left side, you see the factory, a black box, which is the merchandise, and the transportation. So the Ex works for any mean of transportation, which is air, sea, or land. And as you can see in this Incoterm, the responsibility of the seller is to place the goods at the disposal of the buyer in the factory or in agreed place between buyer and seller. And as you can see, the goods are not on the transportation. It's just put it there, and it is the responsibility and the risk of the buyer to load the merchandise on the transport and are responsible to pay, and all the risks are for the buyer. So this Incoterm is obviously preferred by the sellers because it's almost no responsibility. So let's assume that, let's imagine that you buy, let's say, an electronic as an Ex Work Incoterm. Imagine that the forklift comes to pick up the pallet, and they when they are loading this pallet into the transport, something happened and the pallet drops. Well, in that position, the buyer is the one who lose because the risks are on the buyer. So this is this is a very good, let's say, Incoterm for seller, but not good for buyers. So if, okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, the next one, again, the blue color is to the seller, and the orange or yellow is for the buyer. And the green one are joint responsibility. So the transportation in this Incoterm has to be agreed between buyer and seller. So in this Incoterm is also for any mean of transportation. If you can see, the black box is on the transportation, so it's responsibility of the seller to load on the mean of transportation selected, and the cost is paid by the seller up to the premises of the buyer. But the risk are in account of the buyer. So if something happened between the transportation of the goods even if the seller pay for it, I mean, pay for the mean of transportation, the risk is for the buyer. So if something happened with the goods in between the transportation, the one who loses is the buyer. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? So there is another Incoterm that is also for any mean of transportation. As you can see here, the blue lines and the blue color, which is for the seller, it goes up to the premises of the buyer. So that means that the cost and the risk are on the account of the seller up to the premises of the buyer. But that doesn't mean that the seller has to pay any duties or taxes in between. Okay, those are for any mean of transportation. Can we go to the next slide, please? These are for only sea and inland waterway transport, which is our rivers or some spaces that a ship can transport merchandise. The one on the left upper side is the free alongside ship. That means that the goods are agreed to be, as it says, alongside the ship. I mean, it's not responsibility or cost of the seller to load the merchandise on the vessel or the boat or the sea transportation. The next one is the FOB, which is the probably, I mean, most common other than ex-works for the international transportation. It means that the goods has to be loaded on the boat or the vessel, which is the black box that you can see there. The cost and the risk ends there for the seller, and start the responsibility and the risk for the buyer. The cost and freight. As you can see, the vessel is green now, so it has to be agreed between buyer and seller. It's not up to the buyer to decide. It has to be agreed. And that's because the cost of it relies on the responsibility of the seller. But the risk of the buyer starts when when the merchandise are loaded on the vessel. And the last one on the sea transportation is the CIF, which is cost, insurance, and freight. Is very similar to the last one, to the CFR, but in this case, an insurance has to be contracted for the goods, and there are several type of insurance. I mean, there's a little bit more technical talk that we may have if you want to see what kind of insurance or what are the coverage of that insurance is. But I mean, it's good for you to know that there is this Incoterm that your goods, even if the risk is yours, I mean, as a buyer, you have at least an insurance on your goods. So, I mean, it is a little bit technical, this kind of talks about the Incoterms, but the main idea that I want to let you know is that you have to be aware of this Incoterm, because it's really, really common that the Incoterm is not taken into account when you talk about a negotiation, when you start business with a company. But it is, as you can see, it's really, really important to define and to agree an Incoterm before making a first buy or to get into a contract between seller and buyer. Okay, so, okay, can you help me with the next slide, please? Okay, as I said, there are now in the 9th version of the Incoterms. The last one was in 2010. The main, the principal changes are the Incoterm DAT, which is delivered at terminal, was eliminated and changed to delivered at place unloaded. That's because the terminal, it was like a general, it was not a defined spot. Sorry, the terminal was is not a defined place to be deliver the merchandise. So it is now clarified in the DPU Incoterm now. The other change is that the Incoterms FCA, DAP, or DPU was created created thinking on hire a third-party transportation. It was not included when you have your own transportation to move the goods or the merchandise. It was not taken into account in the Incoterms, in the last version of the Incoterms. Well, now in 2020, you can use your own transportation and use these Incoterms, FCA, DAP, and DPU. And as I said, the Incoterms CIF and CIP, they have different, it defines different levels of insurance, what covers, what does not cover, where it starts, what ends, what are the responsibility of the carrier, of the seller, and the buyer. So it is, in the web page of the International Chamber of Commerce, you can go there and inquire a little bit more on the Incoterm. There are online courses that you can take. So if you are in the intention to start business, an international business, it is very recommendable that you take this kind of course, or at least approach to and get the advice to someone that are related to this, so they can give you an advice and accompany you with select the best, or the probably not the word is not the best, the more suitable Incoterm for the operation that you are going to start, or you are willing to start in the international trade. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, there are several documents that you need to take into account when you are doing international logistics. The first of them, obviously, is the invoice. In the North American region, the invoice can be a commercial invoice, but it could be also a pro forma invoice, but it is more preferable to use the commercial invoice to make an international trade and logistics. You obviously have to have the packing list. Also, in the sea way of transportation, the bill of lading, it is a really critical and important document. Between Mexico and Canada, to be honest, there are small amount of business that are moving by sea. Most of them are moving by other means of transportation, but I understand that in the audience, maybe a person from other countries, so it's worth to know that the bill of lading is issued by the carrier, by the one who moves the goods. It acts as a contract for transportation, and when the goods are arrived to the destination, it can also act as a title of ownership, because you cannot, you as a receiver or as a buyer of the goods, when it arrives to the port, you have to present a document that you are the owner of that goods that is on the vessel. You cannot present the invoice because the carrier doesn't know about the invoice, or if it's valid or if it's not valid. So the bill of lading acts as a title of ownership in that case. There are different type of bill of lading. There are original bill of lading, there are negotiable bill of lading, there are non-negotiable bill of lading. There are also electronics bill of lading, which is the tele release. I mean, there are several types of them, but the important thing is that you have to know that this acts as a title of ownership. So without it, you cannot claim the goods that are on the vessel, even if it's you already paid it. It also, in some cases, the bill of lading act as a way of sellers to get the payment. So the bill of lading, you have to present it physically to the authorities, to the port, to the carrier. So you can get your goods. So if you don't have it in physical, you cannot claim it. So it acts also as a way of the seller to get the payment from the buyer. So when you pay, you get your bill of lading, and then you can claim your goods. Talking about specifically commerce between Mexico and Canada, you have to take into account that there is not a bridge between Mexico and Canada. We have to pass through the US. So in that case, you have to issue a document which is a transport inbound. The inbound is a document that the US government create to allow the transit of the goods in US territory without paying taxes or any duties, because it is intended that you are going to enter to the US and then exit to the US. So that bond allows you for transport companies to move the merchandise from Mexico to Canada through the US without paying any taxes or any duties. Okay, so the other documents that you may take into account is the permits that you may need to export to Canada or to import from Canada to Mexico. Also, you have to meet some certification, especially in special products like electronics, computers. I mean, there is several products that may need, beside the permit, a certification. In Mexico, we call it NOMS, which is the Norma Oficial Mexicana. It is the certification that you need for import into Mexico in some special products. The other document, as our Deloitte partner says, is the certificate of origin with the new format and the new requirements that we previously heard in the previous talk. Okay, I like to talk a little bit on some of those documents. Can you help me with the next slide, please? Okay, talking about specifically the invoice, it is important that you have or you show in the invoice the physical address of your company. That's because in a lot of cases we saw that company says SYZ Inc. Company, and then the address they say they put PO Box X in that city and that state, but that is not the physical address. So if you want to import from Canada to Mexico, you need to give the authorities here the physical address of your supplier. So it is really, really important that if you plan to export from Canada to Mexico, that you will need to put in your invoice your physical address. It is also important to show or give to the buyer the tax ID, which is a data that you have to put in the import pedimento into Mexico, or you have to put in the export pedimento from Mexico to Canada. So either way, you will need the tax ID of the buyer or the seller. The other thing that you have to take into consideration are the units and the price, how you put it or how you sell it. I mean, I have some cases that, for example, in the steel industry, when you sell a tube, a steel tube, you usually sell it as a unit, as a piece. So you sell 10 pieces of this tube, of this diameter, of this specification at X price. But it happens that when you want to import into Mexico, the HS code, which is the harmonized tariff, requests that the unit of that product has to be in kilograms. So it is really, really difficult to change or to convert the unit price of piece or unit to kilograms. So you have to take this into account. It doesn't have to be in all the products, but you have to take this into account when you are going to buy and sell between Mexico and Canada, because the unit it could be a showstopper when you want to import or export into Mexico or into Canada. Okay, talking about the packing list, it is really, really important to place the quantity. It is kind of obvious, but in some cases, I have seen packing list that has no quantity, just a number of pallets, but you have to have the quantity of the product that you want to move. The weight, you have to express it in net weight and gross weight. You have to put both of them. And the identification of the part number. This is important because, I mean, we know that the process and the products are not perfect. There are going to be some defects or complaints about products because, as I said, no process is perfect. I mean, you cannot have 100% of your production in good condition. We know that it's part of the quality or the operation that some of the products are going to be in bad condition. That is a reality, and that we have to live with it. So in those cases, you may want to return the product to Mexico or to Canada. Specifically for Mexico, you have to prove that the product that you export is going to be returned to the country. And we made it by one, the invoice, and two, by the part number. So you have to place the part number in any of the documents that you are going to use to get the product back into Mexico to make good the claim. So the part number it is a way that you can prove to the Mexican authorities that the product that is returning into Mexico, it is the same that you export in the first place. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is an example of the bill of lading. That is a bill of lading of operation. That's why you see our name on it. What are the important things that you have to check here? First of all, on the upper left of the document is the shipper, which is the seller. You have to make sure that the name and the address and all the data there are accurate. The second on the left, it is the consignee. I mean, this is the really, really important part of the bill of lading that you have to check, because it has to be your name or the buyer name. It has to be correctly, because as I said, the bill of lading acts as a title of ownership. So imagine that the bill of lading, which it says right there, is M&E Global Logistics. Let's assume that for some reason the document says only M&E Global. Well, when I go to the port and say, well, this merchandise is mine, and the bill of lading says M&E Global only, I will not be able to prove that I am M&E Global because my legal name is M&E Global Logistics. So you may get into a big trouble to claim your goods from the carrier company. So this is a really important field that you have to be taking into account. Usually the carrier or the agent that you contract for the transportation send you this document for a review. Most of the cases, well, we don't know what to review. Well, that's the good thing. I mean, you now know that you have to check this field specifically. The third field is the notified party. This is who is going to receive or he's going to get the notification that the goods are going to arrive to a certain port in the destination. The fields below are the container, the seal of the container, the quantity of products, the gross weight, the net weight, and the cubic meters that is on that container. So this is also an important field to review because that is the quantity that you are supposed to receive. So if in those fields below says a less quantity, you will get the less quantity and you will not be able to claim that are more or less that probably you get on an invoice or a packing list. So this document is one you are going to receive from the carrier. Okay, so there are some basic points on this bill of lading. And as I said, this is basically for sea transportation. For inland transportation between Mexico and Canada, we use a document that is also called bill of lading, but it's more a letter of instruction. And it does not have the weight on legal side point of view as a marine or sea bill of lading. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, let's talk about a little bit of the logistics between Mexico and Canada. As we heard on the previous exponents of Deloitte, Mexico and Canada, we are part of the USMCA trade agreement. Here in Mexico is TMEC. In Canada is CUSMA, I think. So each country has their own name, but at the end is a North American trade. In 2020, Canada was the fifth largest trading partner to Mexico. And Canada was the third larger for Mexico was the third larger for Canada. And also, well, in percentage may sound loud, but it is a reality that the Canada is the second main destination for Mexican exports. Okay, so well, the main products, as we have heard during this morning, was automotive related products, electronics, etc. Well, for the import and the export, first you have to have or you must have a business number issued by the CRA, which is the Canadian Revenue Agency for Canadian companies, to be able to import and export. For Mexican companies, you have to have a permit from the SIT, which is the revenue service also here for Mexican companies. The permit is called Padrón de Importadores o Exportadores. I mean, both of those, you can get it online. You can get into the systems of the government give us to make these processes to get the permit to be able to import and export. For Mexican companies, you have to be aware that beside this permit or beside to have this padrón de importadores, in some specific products, you must have also a special permit, which is a padrón específico, is the term in Spanish. It is a specific permit that allows you to import special products or sensitive products for Mexican government, which are still related, which are textile, which are alcoholic beverage. I mean, there is a series of 8 to 9 sensitive or special products that you must have a special permit to import into Mexico. For export from Mexico to Canada or to any other country in the world, the truth is that there are less requirements, but specifically in steel, you also have to have a special permit and give a notice to the Mexican government that you are going to export steel. I mean, you have to be aware of this point and make sure that you have you are allowed to import and to export between Mexico and Canada. The second point is that you should consider to hire the services of a licensed custom broker. In Mexico, it's agente aduanal. It is very helpful to have these services, because the reality is that you may act as an importer, as yourself or as your company, but there are a lot of requirements that you have to know and meet to be able to do by yourself the import or the export of the goods. So that is highly recommended to hire the services of a licensed custom broker. They help you to get the classify of your goods. I mean, the tariff or the HS code, as our partners of Deloitte said, the HS code is a series of 8 to 10 numbers that is also set the basis of a language, of a common language of products. So that the tariff and the HS code gives you the requirements that you have to meet to import or export certain type of products. It also determines the duty that you have to pay, the taxes that you have to pay, and also determine as, they also gives you the lines or they instruct you how to certify the origin of the merchandise. So if you don't know what is the HS code of your product, you have to know it before you make an import or an export of your products. They also, the custom brokers also help you to determine the value of the duty, which is not the value of the merchandise. It is commonly a mistake that the imports or the exports made. The value of the merchandise has to have some add-ons on the value to get the value for duty and the value for taxes. So it is a more technical talk about it. It is a way of how to value your merchandise, so you can get the total value of your product plus the other add-ons, so you can get charged on duties and taxes. So that's why it is important to have a licensed custom broker. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, you have to have your certificate of origin. meeting all the requirements and make sure that the certificate of origin are valid. We just heard about how to determine or how to know if your product is a candidate to be certificate of origin, to have a certificate of origin. I mean, it doesn't mean that if you do it in Mexico and you have your raw materials come from other parts of the country, the fact that you made it in Mexico, that doesn't mean that you can issue a certificate of origin. You have to meet some certain specific rules to be met to create the certificate of origin. The fourth point is, well, make sure to meet the restriction and regulations, and make sure that your product can be imported or exported between Mexico and Canada. There are some prohibited products that you can export to Canada and to import into Mexico. For example, in Canada, you cannot import or you cannot send to Canada firearms, weapons, for example, goods that are manufactured by wholly or in part by a prison labor. You cannot send to Canada used motor vehicles. You cannot also send to Canada used mattresses, for example, which is funny why you will send used mattresses, but you cannot send it to Canada. You cannot send to Canada also furs. I mean, there's certain products that you cannot send to Canada. So you have to be aware of what you can send to Canada. Or on the other way around, there are certain products that you cannot get into Mexico. Also firearms, some products, some pharmaceutical products. So get instructed and see if your products that you want to sell or export to Canada or import to Mexico are allowed to do it. So you have to meet the restriction and regulations. The fifth point is, well, select the best means of transportation and select the insurance that you're going to place on your goods. And one of the most important points to prepare for import or export is to project and build your costs, including all the logistics charges. In our experience, here is where most of the companies fail in the project or import or export their goods, because they don't take into account all the costs included in the logistics, because there are costs that you have to pay for import, for export, duties, transportation, warehousing, cross-docking, crossing borders, inbounds. I mean, those are charges that if you sum all of those charges, it probably makes no sense to export, or you probably have to change the price. I mean, the price that you will think that you will sell your product in other countries. So this is a very, very important point to review and point to take into account. Get your build up, your cost build up, and make sure that it's still a business. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, talking about the meaning of transportation, this is a map of the railroad between Mexico and Canada. So we are well connected on the industrial corridor, which is the central Mexico, up to the Canada. So the rail company, I think it is Kansas City, and the Canadian company is CN, I think is the company of the railroad. So we are well connected. In this type of transportation, you can use also an option that is the intermodal option on transportation, which means that you use truck and railroad hired by only one carrier. So that's also a good option for moving your products between Mexico and Canada. Can we go to the next slide, please? The other, I mean, this is the highways that we have between Mexico and Canada. There are the Central Region Corridor, the East Corridor, the West Corridor, and the Central Corridor. So we are well connected in railroad and highways to move goods between Mexico and Canada. That's why the sea transportation is not common between Mexico and Canada, but it is an option too. But I think that the most preferred mean of transportation is rail or is by truck. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Okay, that's it. That's our presentation. I hope you enjoy it. It is a pleasure again to be here, and I'm open to questions now.
Thank you so much, Emilio, for your informative information and presentation. Yes, I do have some questions from the audience. I would like to read to you the first one. Can we use all Incoterms such as DAT or DDU still?
Yes, you can still use old Incoterms, but you have to declare that in the commercial terms. So you have to put, for example, if you want to use an old Incoterm, which is DAT, you have to put DAT, you have to specify where you are going to deliver the goods, and at the end, you have to put Incoterm 2010. So you have to specify which Incoterm or which version of the Incoterm are you using. But in that case, it is not recommended because the Incoterms are getting get actualizations. So the old Incoterms disappear because they are not clear or because they are open to interpretation. So it is not recommended, although you can still use it if you want.
Okay, thank you. And I have a second question. If we lost the bill of lading, that means that we cannot get our goods from the carrier?
Well, in the sea transportation, that is correct. I mean, if you get lost your bill of lading, your physical bill of lading, you cannot claim your goods. I mean, we have had some cases when the supplier send the bill of lading by courier or by postal services, and the bill of lading get lost. And then we get in a big problem because we are not able to claim the goods from the carrier. But in those cases, and as the technology has advanced, we have electronic bill of ladings, which is the telex release. So that is your options if you want to avoid to have a physical bill of lading that you have to surrender to the custom broker that is going to make the import for you. You are able to get a telex release, but be aware that not all the countries allow the use of telex release. For example, I used to work for a company in Brazil, and in Brazil you cannot use telex release. You have to present the physical bill of lading. But lucky for us, Mexico and Canada, we can use telex release on sea transportation.
Okay, thank you, Emilio, for that response. And the last question I have here is it expensive, the services of a customs broker?
Well, it depends. The service of the custom brokers are not expensive, but any dollar or any penny that you expend on a custom broker or on an advice on a freight forwarder or a company like us is well worth it because we save you money at the end of the operations. So any consider this not as an expense, consider this as an investment on your import-export project.
Okay, thank you, Emilio. And I think that's it. Thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. On the screen, we present your diploma as a recognition for attending our event, which will be sent to you